secret investigations to eyewitness accounts, these are some of the wildest UFO sightings and government projects in history. The Kecksburg incident took place on December 9th, 1965, and it's often referred to as Pennsylvania's Roswell. On that evening, a bright fireball was spotted across 6 US states and even parts of Canada, particularly over Detroit and Windsor. Witnesses reported seeing a large object streak through the sky, creating sonic booms and even causing some grass fires in Michigan and northern Ohio. In Kecksburg, about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, locals described hearing a thump and seeing blue smoke. The US Army and state police sealed off the area where the object was believed to have landed, but when search teams arrived, they apparently found nothing. Authorities claimed that it was likely just a meteor, but decades later in 2005, NASA released a statement saying that fragments from the area had been analyzed and came from a Soviet satellite. They also said that the records detailing this had been lost in 1987. The whole thing just felt very fishy. Was the object an extraterrestrial craft, debris from a Soviet space probe, a military satellite? Till this day, we still don't know. On June 21st, 1947, Harold Dahl, a harbor patrolman, claimed he saw 6 donut-shaped craft hovering over Maury Island, Washington. According to Dahl, one of these craft began releasing debris that resembled light metal, which he said caused injuries to his dog and a crew member. A man named Kenneth Arnold heard about the story, and having just recently reported seeing unidentified flying objects himself, he was pretty interested in the case. Arnold interviewed Dahl and his fellow crew member Fred Chrisman. They showed him fragments of what they said came from this UFO. The US Air Force flew in to investigate, but then their plane mysteriously crashed, killing both the officers inside. Then the FBI concluded that the sighting had been a hoax. Dahl himself allegedly told investigators that if questioned, he would claim it was all made up to avoid any trouble. Edward Ruppelt, the head of Project Blue Book, later characterized the Maury Island incident as the dirtiest hoax in UFO history. But was it just a hoax? Some think that the hoax explanation may have been a cover-up to distract from something bigger, like military operations or technology that the government wanted to keep secret. On the night of March 24th, 1967, something happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Robert Salas, a then 26-year-old US Air Force lieutenant, was in a secure underground launch control center overseeing 10 Minutemen intercontinental ballistic missiles when everything went dark. Just before the missile systems failed, a security officer on the surface frantically called Salas, saying that there was a glowing oval-shaped object hovering above the base. Apparently the object exhibited strange movements. It had stopped suddenly and made sharp turns that no aircraft at the time would have been capable of making. Salas felt that they were under attack, but not by any known threat. I mean, what type of technology could have disabled the missiles? Within 10 seconds, all 10 missiles had just disabled at the same time. This had never happened before. After the incident, Salas was instructed not to discuss what happened and signed a non-disclosure agreement. For decades, he kept quiet, but in the mid-90s, he started sharing this story. He later discovered that just 8 days prior to his experience, another similar incident had occurred at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, where 10 more missiles were disabled. Salas estimates that within a 6-month span, a total of 30 nuclear missiles were affected. Official Air Force documents declassified in 1996 confirmed these events at Malmstrom. One of the most talked about topics in recent years is the Navy's released UFO videos. In December of 2017, the New York Times revealed 3 videos recorded by US Navy pilots that were encounters with mysterious flying objects. The videos, named FLIR-1, Gimbal, and Go Fast, were filmed during training exercises off the coast of San Diego and East Coast. The footage showed UAPs moving at incredible speeds, performing all these maneuvers that didn't look like any known aircraft. The objects appeared to be flying against the wind, changing direction instantly, and looked to have no visible propulsion. The Navy pilots used advanced infrared cameras capturing the heat signatures of these objects. In the gimbal video, you can even hear how amazed and shocked the pilots are. In 2019, the Pentagon officially released these videos, confirming they were authentic and stated that they were part of a larger program to investigate UAPs. The US Department of Defense established the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force to assess these encounters and any potential threats they might pose to national security. What's fascinating is that some military personnel, including former Navy pilot David Fravor, have come forward describing their experiences with these UAPs, saying that these encounters are still unexplained. The Belgian UFO waves spanned from November of 1989 to April of 1990. It all started on November 29th, 1989, with reports of large, triangular objects flying at low altitudes across Belgium. A lot of the witnesses described these crafts as having lights underneath. On the night of March 30th to the 31st of 1990, the Control Reporting Center in the village of Glons received reports of unusual lights moving through the sky. In response, 2 fighter jets were sent to investigate. The pilots were able to get radar locks on targets, but they reported seeing nothing unusual. Over the following weeks, 143 people or so reported seeing something in the sky that night, but all these accounts came in after the fact. Eyewitnesses claimed to see 4 lights in a square formation, making erratic movements before disappearing. Some believe the Belgian UFO wave case was a genuine UFO. Others think that this could be a case of mass hysteria, but what do you all think? On July 11th, 1991, Mexico City experienced a total solar eclipse, but as the sky darkened, people down below saw something they'd never been expecting to see. Guillermo Aragon, a television executive, was filming the eclipse from his rooftop when he noticed a strange object hovering above. His footage caught the attention of Jaime Maussan, a well-known Mexican journalist. He described his reaction saying, "When I saw it, I said, oh my god, this is a UFO, a real UFO." 8 days later, Maussan aired the footage in a special broadcast. The response was overwhelming, with the network receiving 40,000 calls at once. Viewers began sending in their own videos too, and at least 7 showed similar objects in the sky. One 19-year-old student named Eric Aguilar described seeing a white dot that transformed into a larger, shining object. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, businessman Luis Lara captured another video of a metallic object. Maussan noted that many of these reports and videos were very similar. It looked like people had spotted the same UFO at different locations. 2 months later, engineer Vicente Sanchez recorded another shiny object during a military air show, describing its undulating movement, and a year after that, a similar object appeared at the same air show, moving against the wind. Since that eclipse, Mexico has just seen thousands of UFO sightings, like this next one. Another one of the most fascinating UFO sightings in Mexico took place on March 5th of 2004, when Mexican Air Force pilots came across a series of mysterious glowing objects over southern Campeche state. They spotted a total of 11 unidentified flying objects and quickly started filming them as they hovered around in their jet. The footage goes on for a long time. You get to see these things clearly gliding across the sky at high speed in this organized formation. This was definitely not your typical flash in the sky kind of sighting. The pilots attempted to follow the objects, but they eventually vanished from sight. Project Sign was an official U.S. government study on UFOs initiated by the United States Air Force in 1948. The project was an early attempt to investigate the growing number of unidentified flying object sightings following World War II. Project Sign was established under Air Force General Nathan Twining, head of the Air Technical Service Command. Its primary goal was to collect and evaluate all available information on UFO sightings. There was a lot of paranoia surrounding UFOs at this time. This was right after World War II, and many thought that these mysterious objects could pose a real risk. On April 27, 1949, the Air Force released a report summarizing what they'd gathered so far. The document indicated that some UFOs seemed to be genuine aircraft, but that there wasn't enough evidence to determine their origin. Most sightings were explained as misidentified objects, though, but the report did call for an ongoing investigation. Retired Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt later claimed in his 1956 book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, that Project Sign had produced an estimate of the situation, suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for these UFOs. But General Hoyt Vandenberg, the chief of staff at the Air Force, ended up shutting down the project because of a lack of any proof. Following Project Sign, there was Project Grudge, which took a much more skeptical stance on UFOs. This project just outright dismissed reports as misidentifications, mass hysteria, or hoaxes. It seemed like they had a very clear agenda to discredit witnesses and make the idea of unidentified flying objects and aliens just seem silly to the public. Before Project Sign, there was Majestic 12, or MJ-12, a secretive group that supposedly formed to investigate the Roswell incident in 1947. Allegedly, this group consisted of 12 scientists, military officials, and politicians tasked with examining the alien spacecraft that reportedly crashed in New Mexico. Eyewitnesses claimed the craft carried extraterrestrials, prompting the need for a covert operation that would later lead to the establishment of Area 51. But back to Roswell for a moment. At first, the military actually announced they recovered a flying disc, but they quickly changed their tune, saying it was just a weather balloon. This inconsistency seemed highly suspect, especially as witnesses like rancher Hy-Brasil described strange debris and strange-looking, almost non-human bodies being recovered from the scene. Now, interest in MJ-12 began in the late 70s when a letter allegedly from President Truman was leaked, authorizing the creation of this secret organization. Some documents were later found that referenced MJ-12, though the government insists these are fake. But two classified documents in the National Archives do mention MJ-12. Some believe that MJ-12 used advanced alien technology to influence human thoughts or even erase people's memories. It's also believed that MJ-12 was involved in overseeing alien abductions, allowing extraterrestrials to abduct people in exchange for advanced tech, which they reverse engineer at Area 51, which houses alien crafts and possibly even aliens themselves. Project Blue Book was a US Air Force program that investigated UFO sightings from 1952 to 1969. It followed earlier programs, Project Sign and Project Grudge, but Blue Book became the most comprehensive effort to study UFOs. Project Blue Book collected over 12,000 UFO reports. Of these, about 700 stayed classified as unexplained after investigation. The project focused on two main questions. Were UFOs a threat to national security? And were they actually of extraterrestrial origin? The answers to these questions were made less clear to the public than the public would have hoped. One of the most interesting cases investigated by Blue Book was the 1966 Michigan UFO sightings, where a number of people, including police officers, reported seeing strange lights in the sky. The Air Force dismissed the reports at first, but people were so adamant about what they saw that they were forced to reevaluate the incident. In 1967, a panel of scientists reviewed the evidence and ultimately deemed the sightings, quote, not entirely explainable. By the late 60s, the Air Force began to wind down Project Blue Book, saying they just hadn't gathered enough evidence for extraterrestrial life. The project officially ended in December of 1969, with the Air Force releasing a final report that concluded UFOs did not pose a threat and that most sightings could be attributed to misidentified aircraft, balloons, or astronomical phenomena. A strange UFO sighting was captured over New Jersey recently. In a 13-second clip shot near Atlantic City on a Sunday night back in December, a strange white light blinks in the sky before suddenly vanishing. Family members who were watching the light in the sky were completely baffled by what they were looking at. The thing just kind of hovers in the sky, slightly flickering before it looks like it disappears. Turns out that's not exactly the case. A man named Tim Janicki, who received the footage from a friend, posted it online with the heading reading, "I don't trust random videos I see on X, but this is 100% real." So this video has been getting shared around quite a bit. One commenter pointed out, "You can see it didn't just disappear, but it took off with incredible speed. There's a small flash of light to the left as it leaves. Humans can't produce the energy required to go that fast, especially from standstill." And that's true. If you look closely, you do see this really quick blip of light appear in the upper left of the screen right after the strange orb of light looks like it vanishes. Other people commented similar things, like one person saying, "No flight system we have right now can go from stationary to warp drive in an instant. These flight characteristics are well beyond light years ahead of us. Now, this is just one incident in a long list of strange sightings in the sky over New Jersey, which led the FAA to briefly limit drone flights in some areas. The FBI and other federal agencies have been looking into a bunch of the reports apparently, and they claim that so far they haven't found anything pointing to a national security threat. Again, so they say. This footage here was posted to Reddit by user YogurtClosetFlat5701 just a couple weeks ago with the caption, "This just happened above Brookville Boulevard, Snake Road in Queens, New York, right next to JFK Airport. We looked up and there were 4 orange orbs in formation in what is supposed to be a no-fly zone. They then started to disappear. Did anybody else in the area witness this?" End of post. And that's a good question. Any New Yorkers in the comments see this as well? Let us know down in the comments here. There are some interesting comments from other witnesses on the post though. One user, Zora Octavia, wrote, "Lived here for 14 years with planes flying by all day, every day. They fly so low it feels like you can almost touch them. I know what they look like when they come in to land and take off. I have never seen anything like this. Ever." And that's not the only strange orange orb that's been spotted in the sky recently. On December 26th, a Redditor by the name of HellFollowed84 posted this footage. The video was shot in central Georgia. A father had gone to take out the trash when he spotted the strange orb in the sky. He noticed something, quote, bright and orange overhead through the pines. He pointed it out to his son and they both just stared at it for several minutes before deciding to film it. The father shared the video on Reddit. In the clip we see this glowing orange orb gliding across the sky, weaving between the tops of pine trees. At one point, the orb looks like it dims and then vanishes entirely. As HellFollowed84 wrote, "When I first observed it, the light was huge, but it was way off, like half a mile. As it got closer, it seemed to dim but stayed the same luminous lighting. As I walked further to capture it, I thought, what if it was trying to evade me?" A bunch of Redditors wondered if it could be a plane, but the user didn't think so, saying it made no sound, unlike the planes that frequently fly over his home. And we're back to New Jersey with another set of strange lights in the sky captured on camera recently. A YouTuber named CJ Faison recently posted footage showing what he believes are drones flying in, quote, deliberate formations off the coast of New Jersey over the Atlantic Ocean. He took a boat 26 miles out from the Pine Barrens to get the footage using a night vision camera. In the video, he'd gone out to get footage of the mysterious drones that people have been spotting in the skies over the last couple months. He did manage to capture a bunch of these blinking lights in the sky. Some are stationary, some are seen moving through the sky, some appear and disappear completely, and some of the drones seem to zip across the horizon at incredible speeds. It is definitely odd. CJ wrote in the video description, "The drones in New Jersey have been seen coming from the ocean for several weeks. We found UAP drones in the middle of the ocean 100%. This is something they don't want you to see." Now, sure, people have access to drones nowadays. There are more things in the sky than there ever have been in history, but it seems like people are spotting particularly bright, rather large objects moving at speeds way too fast to be your over-the-counter drone. And again, the FBI is getting involved. They've investigated around 5,000 reports about these drones, claiming that about 100 of them are considered credible. As of now, there have been no clear answers from authorities on who's behind the drones or what they're up to. This next report comes out again from New Jersey. This time it's not just lights in the sky though. Whatever this object was, it actually affected the clock in a family's car. In early December, a family reported a strange effect while following one of these strange crafts that people have been seeing in the sky. As they drove along, the car's clock suddenly changed time, then went back to normal once they drove away. Local law enforcement in Morris County insists that there's no known threat to public safety, but residents are still trying to figure out what's going on themselves. There's even a Facebook group with over 17,000 members exchanging info on these sightings. One local software engineer, Rich Dunjewski, thinks the clock change might be a clue. He commented, "Many newer cars get their clock time from GPS satellites," adding that the drones could be using GPS jamming or spoofing. He went on to say that if these drones are using, quote, GPS jamming, then it's plausible the car would follow the signal and change the clock. FAA contractor David Lombardo agreed, saying these drones likely have electronic interference capabilities. base. A strange UAP was captured on camera back in 2018, but the video was kept secret for years. It was just released to the public last year in January of 2024. The object was spotted flying over a US military base in Iraq and was tracked by a military infrared radar. It moved across the base before making a controlled descent into a body of water. About 17 minutes later, it reappeared and took off at an incredible speed. The Pentagon has officially classified it as a UAP. What caught a lot of attention was how quickly the object changed color. You'll notice that the object keeps switching from this semi-translucent look to black. And since the video was shot using infrared, the color changes indicate shifts in temperature. The object was changing temperature so fast that it actually made it difficult for the radar to even track. And according to Dr. Matthew Sadagis, a physics professor at the University of Albany, it was doing this, quote, faster than any known object. This next video comes from the YouTube channel Plant Abundance, who wrote in the description that he'd been outside doing some tree work when this bright object caught his eye. He watched it as it stayed stationary for about a minute and a half before fetching his camera. He caught the tail end of it before it drifted downward and faded out. Again, this is another recent clip posted on October 14th of 2024. Now the object is hard to make out. It's obviously pretty high up, but zooming in, it's definitely not a plane or a satellite. It doesn't even look like your typical drone. It looks like a spherical metallic object. So what is it? I don't know. What do you all think? This footage was taken a few years ago. It's another spherical flying orb. The AARO, the office within the US Department of Defense that handles UAPs, released the footage captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone during a Senate hearing in the Middle East. The video shows an orb smoothly flying through the sky at a high speed. The AARO came out saying that they had no idea what it was, calling it a genuine UAP, but they also mentioned it was not the first time they'd seen something like it. On December 16th of 2024, tourists at Disney World in Orlando caught sight of a glowing red UFO streaking upward in the night sky. The object kinda looks like a falling star, but in reverse. The video made the rounds on TikTok with people commenting it was a UAP of extraterrestrial origin. Now, unlike a lot of the other stuff on this list, this one may have a very clear explanation, and while that explanation probably isn't aliens, it's still pretty cool. The glowing streak was probably a SpaceX rocket that launched that night. Falcon 9's reusable booster successfully landed in the Atlantic after 8.5 minutes. SpaceX was transporting a GPS satellite for the US military. There was a similar sighting near Disney on December 23rd, also very likely a SpaceX mission. So this final story comes from a new docu-series called Investigation Alien. Footage was captured showing a strange object descending into the English Channel. The series follows journalist George Knapp and his team, including underwater archaeologist Rory Kremer, as they dig into evidence of extraterrestrial life. During one of their expeditions off the coast of Normandy, they spotted an illuminated object about 200 yards away. At first, it was stationary, but then it sped off, only to return later, but at that point, most of the crew was asleep. Kremer, though, was on night watch, and he was able to capture the object on camera as it plummeted into the water. Knapp was shocked when he saw the footage. He returned Kremer for an explanation, and Kremer, who's been in the field for over 20 years, admitted, "I don't got any answers, do you?" He thought it might be a flare, but it didn't have the typical smoke. As the object disappeared into the water, Knapp suggested it could be tied to some sort of subterranean base. Kremer pointed out that local tribes in the region have long reported unexplained lights, which were often linked to gods.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington, something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have 2 commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane, and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like 2 large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently 2 beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man, along with his boatmates, had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing. 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. But looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a domed stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy-Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing godlike beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy-Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the island's appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote and the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across two chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface, pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard, finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Disclosure Project. The Disclosure Project is a non-profit organization founded in 1993 by Dr. Stephen M. Greer, who was a physician and UFOologist, and the goal of the project is to bring forth information about the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and their interactions with humanity to the public and government officials. The organization has collected over 800 witness testimonies from military, government, and intelligence officials who have had direct involvement with UFO sightings and extraterrestrial encounters. Literally, this entire group is aimed at doing exactly what we're here talking about today. The Disclosure Project believes that governments around the world have been suppressing information about the existence of extraterrestrial life and that the truth needs to be disclosed to the public. We love a little whistleblowing. They advocate for the declassification of government files related to UFO sightings and for public hearings on the issue. The organization has received criticism and skepticism from some who believe their claims are unfounded. However, the Disclosure Project continues to push for transparency and the release of information to help us better understand our place in the universe. Did you see those James Webb photos? How are we supposed to understand our place in the universe? Alright, when the universe is that big, buddy, still processing it. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Chilean UFO. Okay, so it turns out that there's been a lot of UFOs spotted in Chile, and the government isn't exactly shy about releasing some of the footage. In 2010, the Chilean government released a series of UFO footage that has since become one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the history of the phenomenon. The incident began in November 2010 when Chile's National Agency for UFO Research received reports of strange objects in the sky over the country's capital, Santiago. The agency then requested the assistance of the Chilean Air Force to investigate the sightings. The Air Force dispatched a team of experienced pilots to investigate the objects, which had been picked up on radar. The pilots were able to track the objects and capture video footage using advanced equipment. The footage showed multiple objects flying in formation at high speeds, performing maneuvers that seemed impossible, really, for any known aircraft. After careful analysis, the Chilean government concluded that the objects were not weather balloons, they were not aircrafts, or any other known objects. While the government did not explicitly state that the objects were extraterrestrial in nature, the incident has been widely regarded as one of the most credible pieces of evidence in support of the existence of UFOs. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This encounter wasn't actually supposed to be released initially, but the New York Times allegedly leaked it, so the government didn't really have much of a choice and decided to release it themselves. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos. We will talk about another one later on in this list. With this particular video, there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the of footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights UFO incident occurred on March 13th, 1997, when thousands of people in Arizona reported seeing a series of bright lights in the sky in a V-shaped formation. Eyewitnesses described the lights as silent and moving slowly across the sky. The event gained significant media attention and became one of the most well-known UFO sightings in history. Some skeptics dismissed it as flares or a military exercise, but many other witnesses remained convinced that they had witnessed something otherworldly. One of the most interesting witnesses in this case is former Arizona Governor Fife Symington. In 2007, he decided to reveal that he had seen the object himself, and not only this, but he described it as not from this world. Despite the multiple witnesses and this government official's testimony, the incident remains a mystery, and to this day, no official explanation has been given for the strange lights seen in the sky. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952. He was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports that a UFO had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see 2 beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claimed he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles an hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne Mansfield incident. The Coyne Mansfield helicopter incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite the extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Congress report. For this one, we are talking about a recent report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing. What we, as the public know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual, real, secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise one day, we'll find out. In our number 3 spot today, we have the advanced technology. So this UFO sighting comes from a while ago, but it just recently became quite relevant, and that is because some former US Air Force personnel have begun explaining to the Pentagon that they believe back in the 60s there were UFOs that supposedly had the ability to turn off their nuclear warheads. Apparently these officers recently told this to the government's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, who had contacted former Air Force ICBM launch officer Robert Salas to get information about the encounter with an orange flying disc that switched off 10 warheads at Maelstrom Air Force Base, Montana in 1963. There was another former officer, Dr. Robert Jacobs, who also apparently told the AARO that he had gone as far as to make a film of the UFO for the Air Force in 1964, and that this film captured images of a UFO shooting a test missile out of the sky. With the piquing interest in UFOs and the potential for an advanced civilization apart from our own, it appears as though the government is spending more time now researching and looking into these claims because, well, why would they make them up and then continue on with the same story some 50 years later? In our number 2 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic-Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived they saw what at first appeared to be churning water, while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean that it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This incident is like the mecca when it comes to a government leak. I mean, this incident is infamous for a reason. The whole thing started in 1947 when some sort of crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead it was just a conventional weather balloon. So it was a little sketchy, but most people just let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, but also that extraterrestrial remains were recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to a nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, the whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying about it.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought lot like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary. Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The Coin Incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the Coin Incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sighting, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and Second Deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spur and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spur began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser's spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?